Michael with United Veterans Worldwide, excited today to meet with my new friend Misty. I've come across her Instagram channel and I've seen her smiles, her positivity, but behind all of that was some struggles. And she and I had a great chance to connect on the phone. She shared a little bit with me, but I'm excited for this global audience today to hear her story and to recognize the parallels in trauma and coming to a place of triumph from darkness to light. And I'm excited to introduce you to Misty. Misty, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Misty Gillette. I work in the field of mental health and addiction. I obviously felt I had that purpose to work in that field, just based off of my own experiences and traumas and my own addiction.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you say addiction, addiction for veterans, first responders is not something new. We've we've had to cope with forms of addiction to combat our suppressed trauma for years, and it's a rough road for many people. And I can say that the biggest one for us would probably have been alcohol. It's so ingrained in the culture, and alcohol mixed with trauma is just a bad mix. So anyway, I'm excited to talk with you. So Misty, take me back in time a little bit. Let's go back as far back as you want to go, and let's talk through what influences in your life brought on some extreme trauma and also encouraged bad decision making for a long time.
Absolutely. Okay, so as a young child, I grew up in a household where my dad was a drug addict and a drug dealer. So I experienced, I mean, basically, it was all I knew. All I knew was people coming in and out of the house, cops constantly being called to the house. I experienced my dad basically torturing people and beating people up in the basement as a young kid. And to me, this was all just normal, because I didn't know anything different, right? And I, as young as 8 years old, my dad was already smoking weed with us, right? That's all we knew. And that was his way of bonding with us. In his words later on in life is what he said to me. And then obviously he had that's the way he was raised, right? So it just carried over and carried over. And I got extremely addicted to methamphetamines. I took anything. Like, I was basically a garbage can by the time I was 15 years old. And I never stepped foot in a high school. I dropped out in 8th grade, and I was addicted to drugs, and my whole world was chaos all around me. It was one thing after another, and my dad was beating the shit out of my brother almost on a daily basis. My brother he was 1 year younger than me, so he's 14, in struggling with the same addiction, just taking whatever we could get our hands on, but mostly meth and crack and crank. We were both in the juvenile justice system. My license was suspended till I was 18. It got suspended 2 times. I just remember so many. I'm not going to go into all of the memories. There's a lot of things I don't remember. There's a lot of things I've completely blocked out. But I just remember my dad being just drug-induced psychotic, and mental hospitals and police officers, and trying to hunt down people to hurt them, and I was right there with him. Me and my brother were right there with him, just in it. And then
Wasn't it scary for you to have that environment? I mean, I know you said it was like you're normal because you didn't know anything different, but wasn't it scary? I mean, scary people coming over to the house? How did
Oh
you,
yeah, oh
how,
yeah.
how were you protected by a dad who was an addict himself? How were you protected from these men?
I wasn't. I wasn't protected. Me or my brother wasn't protected. My mom was going through her children being addicted to drugs, her husband being addicted to drugs. She was trying to leave him, and she was trying to take me and my brother with her, but we didn't want to go because we knew that we couldn't have access to the drugs if we went, because that's how addicted we were. And so she tried, but she just couldn't stay. She couldn't stay in that environment. She knew when me and my brother were younger, the situation she was in, but she also had trauma of her own, childhood trauma of her own. And she knew that the environment wasn't a healthy environment. So she went to college, but at that time, like, she was going to work and going to school, and me and my brother were just kind of left to in my dad's graces, you know, and my dad wasn't working. And so, you know, she feels really, really bad for everything that we had to go through.
Yeah.
But she ended up leaving. She ended up leaving my dad, and me and my brother were left with my dad, but we were left with nobody. We were left with nothing. And yes, we had to survive. We had to find a way to survive, me and him, every day. And there were days, even older in my relapse, because we'll talk about that later on, where I didn't know if I was going to make it to the next day. And a lot of times I didn't want to. I didn't want to make it to the next day. And every day that I woke up or made it through some horrific situation or circumstance, it was by the grace of God that I made it through. 100%. And that is what really sparked my faith, is thinking back to those times, thinking how did I even make it through it? I have no idea. It was a miracle. So
it is a miracle. And, you know, my heart breaks when I hear stories like this, that someone so young had their agency taken, one by their parents' decisions, and second by the use of drugs, which steals agency. Obviously, your parents, who were suffering from generational trauma themselves and were passing it on very, very heavily, they didn't have the ability to make good decisions. And it's still their fault. You know, we don't remove that blame, but to a degree, drugs just take your agency. You don't make good decisions. You can't truly protect your kids in those scenarios, which is horrific for me to think about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up getting pregnant at a young age. And that's what helped me quit. I didn't go to rehab. I didn't do treatment. I had a human being inside of my body. And so I ended up quitting. So my boyfriend at the time, we ended up moving out together, and he ended up quitting with me. He actually had gone to jail and was in jail, I think it was like 4 or 5 months. So he was able to be sober. And then I ended up having my son. And in the marriage, I ended up marrying this guy. We were only married for like a year. I realized I started coming into myself. And obviously there was some betrayal trauma that happened in the marriage. And so I ended up leaving him and divorcing him. And I had no coping skills. I didn't know how to do life by myself. And I had a small child. And so I didn't know what to do. I had no education. I had no coping skills. I was still like a child in my brain. And so what do? I'm going through divorce. I have a small child. I have to move in with my mom. So I relapsed. And I relapsed. Yep. I relapsed for a couple years, and in and out of jail. Chaos, complete chaos. Homeless. My house burned down, so I was homeless and I was sleeping on the streets, I would say maybe 6 months. There were times where I even had my child with me during that time. Like, obviously we shared custody with his dad, but it was not healthy. And I was basically doing what my dad did with me as a child. Obviously this was shorter lived. He was a lot younger, so he doesn't remember a lot, but there is still trauma there with him.
Yeah.
And in and out of jail, in and out of jail. I burnt bridge after bridge after bridge. I had nowhere to go. My mom didn't want me there. And I went to jail. My house, was gone. I had nothing, had nowhere to sleep. And my grandma, she never gave up on me. She was like, let's get you into treatment. Let's get you help. Let's get you help. Let's get you help. And finally I gave in and I went to treatment. So I went to rehab for a year. And obviously I was dealing with legal stuff. I was on probation. I was paying fines. And, it was really, really hard. I had nowhere to live. My grandma ended up letting me live at her house because nobody else would let me live there.
Why did she
And
do
she
that?
was,
Why would your
huh?
grandma reach out to you after so many times of relapse and struggle and relapse and struggle? What made your grandma do that?
She's an angel.
Thank
She is an
goodness.
absolute angel. Yeah.
Mm,
So my grandma, my dad's mom, her husband, same thing, just exactly like my dad, very violent, very addicted, drugs, alcohol, everything. She went through it with him, and she actually didn't go get out of it until he died. He ended up dying. So she actually had a lot of empathy for people going through it, and I think she tries to help everybody, and you win some, you lose some. So it wasn't just me who she's tried to help and has helped. It was other family members, cousins of mine that also were stuck in the generational trauma, and her own kids. And so she saw me. She saw me. She actually picked me up off the sidewalk when I was sleeping on the sidewalk, and she would bring me to the house at 2 a.m. and me and my son. She's like, get this baby inside.
mm, mm.
And so she never, ever, ever gave up on me. Even when my mom was like, no, you are not coming to my house. She never, ever gave up on me. So, I mean, to the
Yeah.
point to where, have you ever seen Walk the Line?
Yes.
Johnny and June?
Hmm.
Okay. You know the part where June runs out with the gun? Get out of here, get out of here. So that was her. People would come over, they would knock on the door, they would knock on the window, and my grandma would chase them away.
Good.
Do not come over here. She's getting sober. She's getting sober. Leave her alone. Do not come around here. I'll call the cops. And she was amazing. She saved me. I do. I give her the credit for that time, because without her, there's no way I would have made it. I know it.
There's an important lesson here for everyone to learn. One is when we look at somebody, let's say for instance on the street, what we see initially is a person who's strung out at their worst, and maybe they don't even care at that point, because they're just hurting so badly. And for someone like me to walk by them and to judge them harshly, um, or to discredit them or just look away, it is the wrong thing to do, because when we talk generational trauma, we're talking about a situation where you're being taught incorrect ways of coping from the very beginning of your life. And of course, you're going to follow that same pattern because that's all you've been taught. I want to encourage this global audience to have more empathy when we see people who are struggling in this way, especially with drugs. It makes it look like they don't care and they are just heartless, but they are real people, real struggles. A lot of it is not because of their own choices early on that have influenced this, and they deserve all the love and support we can provide as long as we can provide it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody who uses drugs or alcohol, they don't want to be an addict. They are, it's a disease.
Yeah.
It is a disease, and it is curable, but man, it's hard. And in order to get sober, you literally have to fight every single day to not give in to that urge and reclaim your life piece by piece, which takes time and it's hard. And you have to feel the reality, and you have to feel all of the things that you did when you were using, which are not good things, right? A lot of people don't have a moral compass when they're using drugs.
Yeah.
And so you have to feel all of that when reality sets in. So like I said, nobody wants to be an addict. Nobody wants to use drugs or alcohol to cope with life. in the grasp of it.
So let's take you forward again. Your grandmother who has gone through her own trauma with her spouse, um, which I can't imagine enduring that until the person passes and then you finally break free and you can then start to work with others. But she pulls you out of this to a degree, but now the onus is on you to really start making those changes, which is one of the hardest steps to make.
Yeah, absolutely. There were days I remember at the beginning, I could not get out of bed to go to rehab. I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. It literally took me a good couple of months to be able to start regaining energy. So she would just kind of pull me up out of bed and get my feet on the floor and get me moving. Um, and then after a few months, I started gaining some momentum. Obviously, life was rough. I didn't have a car. I was taking the bus everywhere I went. I was checking into probation. I was taking drug tests. I had to get a job. So I was applying for jobs and eventually started working. I had no education at this point. So I went and I got my GED and enrolled in college. So I started gaining some momentum. It took some time. I started gaining this momentum. I met a guy and I ended up having 2 more kids. Finished college and chose to, my grandma, she was my light in my darkness. She was the only light in my darkness. And so I chose to be a light in other people's darkness because I want other people to know that they can get through it. Every day you want to give up, you just want to die, and you fight between suicide or life or overdosing and life. And I want to be that light, and I want to be able to give people hope. So I started working in the mental health field and addiction field, and I started working with juveniles because it started with me when I was a juvenile. And I remember the moments that I had that were just so torturous. I feel like I'm gonna cry. And I don't ever want anybody to have to go through that on their own. And so I chose to work with juveniles, teenagers, mental health and addiction. And I delved in. I worked for an acute care facility in Utah. And then I got my degree in criminal justice, and I wanted to work with juveniles because obviously I was in the, thank you. I was in the system, the legal system as a juvenile. So I went and worked with juveniles. And then I got some certifications to run addiction groups and certifications to run therapeutic groups for these kids. And then eventually I made my way back to my original facility that I was working at, and then moved to Florida. And when I moved to Florida, I believe that I have made huge impacts on so many people's lives, and they will still reach out to me even today and remember me. And sometimes I'm like, oh, what was your name again? I just didn't realize I made that. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and kids. And I just didn't realize that I made that big of an impact. And with this job now, this is where I really feel like the real work happens, because I get them when they are basically on their deathbed. I talk to them in the hospitals right after they've OD'd. I see them while they're detoxing, going through withdrawals, just crying, thinking that there is no way out. I go to homeless shelters. I work with police officers to get people off the streets, mothers, fathers, and I'm with them and I talk to them face to face. And just yesterday, I got a call from somebody who graduated the program that I work at, and it was so amazing to hear his experience. And just about everybody I work with in the field is in recovery. So we come together, we work together, and when somebody calls me and they're in crisis, I call my team, we work it out, we get them placed right away. within 15 to 20 minutes, we can have a car there to pick them up
Mm.
and get them into treatment.
That,
So this is why I know that things don't happen to me. Things didn't happen to me as a child or during my second relapse. It happened for me. It helped me be able to create this amazing purpose in my life where I can be a light for somebody else. I can give somebody else hope. And this is where I'm grateful for everything that I've went through and everything that I've experienced. I mean, obviously, I had to do a lot of work, and I'm still doing a lot of work. And there are things that trigger me and open father wounds or childhood wounds or memories that will pop up. Even working with like this population, there are times when I'm triggered and something will pop up in my brain that I've completely forgot about, and will remember it. And then I have to go home or call my support system and work through it.
yeah. So
So
what you're describing to me is absolutely amazing, and it parallels the healing journey that many veterans first responders go on, which is there's a certain point where we start to become healthy enough mentally, physically, that we can start to turn our attention back to people like us who have struggled. And your testimony of your experience is so powerful. I wish from the bottom of my heart that you didn't have to go through that suffering as a child. And I wish that for so many out in the world today, but my wishes aren't enough, right? People are going to go through these traumas. They're going to go through these moments. I am so grateful that your grandmother reached out to you in those pivotal moments when it was the hardest and pulled you in and rescued you. I'm grateful that you were willing to be rescued at that point
thank
too, right?
you.
It takes both of those things at the same time. And then for you to develop this gift of empathy that doesn't come any other way than by enduring personal trauma that now you can relate back to and say, somebody will say to you in the hospital or on the street, I've gone too far. You have no idea. I can't even move. I don't want to even move forward. And you're like, I've been there. And that's such a
Yeah,
powerful testimony to people because what they'll see was what I see, a beautiful woman who's put together, who's professional. I don't see the addict. I would never know that
right.
the addict existed.
Yeah, I know. I get that a lot from a lot of people. When I see people at rock bottom
Mm.
on the street, in the hospital bed, I see me. I see who I used to be, and I
Yeah.
feel it to my core.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful. Um, when I was probably in first or second grade, I had a cousin that came and stayed with us, and she was probably 15 or 16, and she was starting to make some poor choices, which is why she moved in with my folks. And she just wouldn't keep the rules. I remember my parents arguing with her and trying to keep her, to make good choices, and she eventually ended up leading a life on the streets of Vancouver, hooked on drugs, and doing things to get money for drugs, right? And her life was a spiral. We lost contact with her for years, and we just assumed with the epidemic of drug use there in Canada legalizing it to try to help it, which made it worse. Um,
Yeah,
and we just assumed that she had died. And then
yeah,
and then years later, she reached out, made connection with her mom, got out of that situation, met a guy who was also in recovery. They married. He was the best thing for her because he understood where she was. She got clean. Um, but the sad part about my cousin is that um, she died. Her body had so much internal chemical deterioration of organs that she only had a couple of years once she was clean to live. But I can tell you that she was so grateful for the prayers, for the interest, for the time that she had left where she could see the sunlight, look at the flowers, look at birds, like really experience the joys of life and relationships. And I'll forever remember the text that she sent me where she just thanked me for my prayers and that God had really helped rescue her after 20 years on the streets.
Wow.
So I believe in change. I believe in miracles. I believe that there's hope for everyone. My question for you would be, how do you get into the psyche of somebody who's an addict to help them flip that switch that says, I'm ready to start moving forward again? I know that they want to be out of the streets or out of
Right.
the vulnerability of drug use, but that's not enough sometimes.
Right. I think, there's so many different ways, and it really is like an art, because it's a very, very individualized, and no situation or circumstance is the same. So getting into somebody's psyche, it takes work, it takes rapport, it takes getting to know somebody, getting to know their story, their situation, what got them there, and then we can start to work on it, right? Because when they're on the streets or when they're in the midst of their addiction, they're either going to fight for their life or they're going to give up, right? And I see both. I see both in this field, and I see fight in people. And I want to remind them of basically my story and where I was, and I was on the streets, and remind them that life can be so beautiful after addiction, after working through mental health issues and traumas. It really can, but you just have to fight. And let me help you. Let me help you get through it. Let me hold your hand. I will literally take you to where you need to go. I will be with you through the process of the healing. And the first 7 days or 10 days is going to be hard. But if you can fight through the detoxification process, we have support with you. We have medical with you. We have loved ones. We call in family members. We try to bring in as much support as possible. And, there are times where, like I said, it is like an art, where one facility or one type of treatment program won't work for that person. So we really want to get in there, assess these people, and get them to the right placement, something that is absolutely best for them. So that's what we work. That's what we do together as a team. I have hundreds of resources, and we all pull together and we work together for this one person. We are all putting our heads together thinking, okay, what will best suit this one person? How can we make sure this one person will succeed? And, the success rate, I would say, is about 60-40, 60% succeed. And then they go through treatment and graduate certain programs. We set them up with aftercare. And there are times where they relapse.
Yep.
And they'll call me and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just relapsed. Can you please help me again? And I will never, ever, not ever give up on anybody. It might be that 64th time that clicks for them, and I won't send them back to the same treatment facility that they went to before, because that didn't work before.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they gathered a bunch of skills and they were able to stay sober for a while, but let's try something different. Let's try a different approach. If that doesn't work, okay, fine. Let's try something different. I will not stop fighting for you. As long as you don't stop fighting for you, I won't stop fighting for you.
Yeah.
Right. But then there are times where you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, and for anyone who's listening today and thinks about addiction, and maybe what you're struggling with isn't a full-on addiction, but it's still negative coping mechanisms that you want to do, but will cause pain or struggle or difficulty in relationships, and yet you still keep choosing that negative coping mechanism. It's the same thing, but on a higher level for addiction, where you want your breath at the same time you want the drug, and it just feeds itself a cycle of abuse that just continues. You mentioned,
Yeah.
Misty, your son, the one that was with you as a baby, probably doesn't remember most of those scenarios, and yet some of that generational trauma would have been passed to some degree. How is your boy doing today?
He's phenomenal. He's doing absolutely amazing. He's entrepreneurial. He's full of amazing ideas. He's full of laughter and fun and happiness. And I also had twins after them.
Mm.
They never ever experienced any of my addiction. However, they know my story. They know everything that I've been through. They see what I do on a daily basis. They listen to my phone calls when I'm talking somebody through crisis. So they are. I have 100% faith that they will never ever ever dabble or even attempt to try anything after seeing and knowing everything that I've gone through. And I do believe 100%, especially me moving to Florida, away from like that side of the family, that I broke generational traumas. I believe it. Yeah.
People will say that generational trauma is near impossible to break, but you put your foot down and stepped in and have stopped
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
That to me makes you a hero. I freaking love that. I freaking love that. My mother was a person who stopped in many ways some generational trauma. Um, she put her foot down and she said, "No more. My kids won't do these things." I remember as a little kid, her telling me that our family had a gene that when they took alcohol even for the first time, they would become addicts to it and drink themselves to death, and which is what happened to several of her uncles. And she said, "Michael, don't ever touch it." And through all of my experiences and combat and everything else, I was tempted, but I never did because I remembered my mom's little whisper in my ear that's like, "Michael, one drink could take you the rest of your life down that hole, and don't do it." So I never did. And I don't know if there's such a thing as a gene for addicts, but I believed it, and so I never
There
touched
is.
it. There is.
There's
Okay.
it's scientifically proven.
Well, my mother
There's a
knew it.
gene for addiction. Yes.
Yeah, and thank goodness because
So good job.
yeah, she saved me from that, and you are a heroic mother to put your foot down and stop this from flooding your
Thank you.
lifestyle and your family. I commend you. As we get
Thank
closer
you.
to the end here, Misty, your story is freaking amazing. It's both sad, um, because I think of you as a little girl in a dangerous situation with dangerous people all around you, and your poor brother who's getting beat at the same time by your dad. I just don't know how people cope with that or how they're able to survive. And I know we have a loving God who's watching over us and still allows things to happen. And in the moment, we can put our fist up to the sky and say, like, why? Why would you allow me to suffer? Right? And maybe it's not until we get to a certain point of healing where we can finally look back up and be like, you saved us.
Yeah.
And not only that, now you've given us a gift to save the rest of your children as much as we can. And I don't know if there's anything more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, like my faith is everything. And, I ask God every day to guide me and lead me to where I need to be. And when I go into hospitals, I ask God to speak through me. And right before I walk into a room, and just a quick little story, I went into a hospital the other day, and the nurses and case managers were like, "She's not going to go. She's not going to go anywhere. She is an ornery old lady. She doesn't want help. She's not going to go." And so I asked about her. How can I build rapport? Because when I go into hospitals, I take time with them. I learn about them. So like I said, it's like an art. And so they talked to me about like different things that she likes, and how she is, what makes her upset, and all the things. And I prayed before I went into this room. She was very welcoming to me. I did not even know what I was going to say. Words just came out of my mouth. There was no pushback. And she says, "Yeah, sign me up. Let's go." Right away. And I was like, that's God. That's God. God used me as a tool to help save a life, and not just one life. And like I said earlier, it didn't happen to me in those moments of why God, why God, why.
Mm.
It happened for me. Even though it was hard and torturous, I have all of the abilities to help other people now because of it. Right. And so God is using me to help other people. I believe that 100%.
Yeah, as do I, and it's obvious that the works that you're doing, it shows that you're letting God lead you, and I love that you pray before you go and do these things. As a warrior, my first thought is always of security. Um, my Yeah, I don't even like my kids to go out at night sometimes because I'm so worried. I'm like, why go out at night? You can't bloody see. There are people out there like, ugh. So my first thought
Yeah.
is always your safety, especially when I heard your story of going to people who are not in their right minds, especially. And but I know God will protect you and keep you and give you that little spidey sense that says, hey, this isn't good. You need to get out of here right now and
Yeah.
let's refocus somewhere else. But anyway, it may not mean much to you, but I'm so proud of you for what you're doing. It, it's
Thank you.
it's amazing to hear the story of a true rescuer who can go into the trenches and pull people out, and where no other source would be there to help them. You are. I don't know if there's anything greater that people can do for humanity.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. In the last couple minutes here, Misty, what advice can you give to people who are listening today who might be in a dark place, maybe not the same scenario, maybe not even drug use, but are in a dark place that are looking to find a place of light?
I would say self-talk. I remember a lot of times when I was in a really, really dark place, even as an adult. I mean, obviously we all go through our things in different situations. I would say self-talk is huge. You are what you tell yourself, and every day, I had those thoughts come in where I just wanted to give up. I didn't want to make it. But then there was that voice inside my head that said, you have to fight. You can do this. You can do this. Fight. Do not give up. Put yourself, pick up your pieces, reclaim your life, reclaim your life. And then I would say a support system. It could be anyone, anybody that's close to you. And if you don't have anybody that's close to you, there are free groups out there, mental health groups, NAs, Alcoholic Anonymous. There are free groups. Google it and get yourself a support system, because nobody can do this alone. No one can do this alone. And the opposite of addiction is connection. So finding somebody healthy that you can connect with and kind of help get you through it. So positive self-talk, support system, connection. And then I would say finding something that creates purpose. I would say that the thing that has got me through some of my darkest days, even as of recent, is the purpose. Even just helping a friend who's having a bad day. That's purpose. Do something that creates purpose. Go do some volunteer work at a homeless shelter. Go take your grandma dinner. It could be anything that helps create purpose. I just feel like that is so therapeutic. And when you feel like you're important to someone, or that somebody else kind of needs you to, even if it's just for a smile, that can create motivation when it comes to wanting to do better or be better.
Yeah, that is so beautifully put because these are the same things that I promote so avidly on this channel. Finding purpose, making and keeping connections, right? That is such an important piece. You talk about self-talk, and um, that's one that I need to mention more and more frequently. Is one, get the stories out of our head. When we start telling ourselves stories, we're not good enough. Of course, we're not going to make it. Of course, we've fallen over and over again. We're never going to be able to stand up and move forward. Not helpful. Um, and finding that purpose is such a key, because this channel represents that for me in my healing journey, right? We're never going to get to a point where we're done healing. it's
Not ever.
We're going to continue to have life experiences that put us all over the page. But
Yep.
but find a way to give back, and that's what you're doing. So I love it. Misty, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing this story. It is truly an amazing recovery journey to see where you are today, and I encourage you to give yourself plenty of grace going forward, and keep doing the things that give you that joy in life. And I look forward to more interaction in the future.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share this. To me, this was just such a therapeutic process, just being able to share it with the world and hopefully give others hope.
Yeah, perfect.